I just really appreciate, and even Weisenberg, and also a Nighthawk, and just everyone who's always in the chat being supportive. VO Bear, Tangi, Randy Nakal, who has sponsored the show, as well as VO Bear in the past. The Crow, always a pleasure. Lady Aquifia, and Acid, and a Mad Painter, always amazing. So let's see, Nora's Boy, can't forget Nora's Boy, and hello Nephilim, and then hello Vasto, and everyone else that's been calling in. Real Power, Will, iPhone. And... all right, you guys, we'll be right back. Angela Black, and today, as my co-host de facto, it's Michael Hemmingson. See you in a few minutes. Missing Peter Petrov.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio. We'll be right back after this short break, so stay tuned.
Hello, folks. This is Acid. Have you visited our site lately? It's at www.freedomslips.com.
Revolution Radio.
Worldwide Internet Radio.
You are listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'd like to take a moment of your time and invite you to explore our main page. Here we have a variety of different avenues to explore. Under different headings, you can find things on the Earth, such as real-time weather, jet springs, and earthquakes. Links to alternative news sources like Drudge and Roe.
www.freedomslips.com.
This is Francis Walsh, and I'm asking you to notice this area devoted to all things space. From solar and planetary observatories to information on all current NASA missions and space weather. If you want to know what's going on out there, we have the tools here right at your fingertips.
If you want to know what our government is up to, look under government documents. If you're interested in different ways of looking at our world, check out the interesting links we have, like the Rabbit Hole 2 or the Awakening. In the members area, we have the schedule where you can keep abreast of the shows and hosts coming up on air.
You will find a library which has many PDF files on many topics such as shelter, bug out kits, making a home still, energy production defense, food preservation and storage. The list goes on.
Have you missed a show by one of your favorite hosts? We have the shows archived for a fee of $35 for 6 months.
This is the Crow. Be sure to stop by and check out my weekly articles on all things stock market and things happening around us. We also have a great chat room, so please join us. We'd love to have you. But remember, you should register a nick so you will have a voice when you are with us.
www.freedomslips.com.
Take a moment to check out our swag store where you can purchase all things Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com. Coffee cups to dog sweaters. These purchases help fund our commercial-free broadcasting.
And please, if you enjoy what you see and hear, remember we are 100% listener-supported, so visit the site support page to help keep us on air. All contributions, big or small, are greatly appreciated. You may contribute by PayPal, and if you're not comfortable with that, then you can find an address where you can send a donation. Thank you for being a part of Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
And don't forget, we are worldwide radio. Your world, your life, your mind is what we discuss on Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com.
Revolution Radio.
Worldwide Internet Radio at freedomslips.com.
Huge inventory of political bumper stickers and messages.
Hi, Anthony Sullivan here for the Turbo
Again, if
Snake.
you're the mother of the child
fastest,
with
easiest way to unblock
Moisty
any
publishing
trader
piece of
box
information to be wonderful.
Finding the right attorney is a daunting task.
Hey, wait a minute. That ain't right. We don't do commercials here. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported, commercial-free radio. So far.
Tell me something good.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into Revolution Radio. Listen to At This Moment with the Nevada nemesis, Miss Angela Black, and the Bulgarian bomber, Mr. Peter Petrov. So call on in, tell him something good. 347-688-2902. freedomslips.com.
Oh, God. All right, guys. Call in and tell me something good.
Yeah! Tell me something good. And now, back to your host, Angela Black and Peter Petrov here with At This Moment, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Okay, Michael Hemmingson, are you still on the air?
I'm here, your
right.
co-host, not de facto, but co-host du jour.
Du jour, my co-host du jour. Very nice. Okay, listen, I've got the one, the only. Correct. He's Neo. He's right here. So I haven't worked out whether or not it's going to sound good on the speakers and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my show over to, the man who knows way more than me and who allowed me, by the way, as I got to read the little accolade and or adulation from your book. So here we go, everyone. This is Michael Hemmingson. He's he's all right. Here we go. I'm going to hand this over, you guys. And Michael, enjoy. He's been waiting to talk to you, salivating. All right, here we go. Here we go.
The man's so nice, they named him twice.
Hi, Michael. How are you? It's Sean.
Hey, Sean.
What's up,
Glad
man?
to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. What a pleasure. What an honor. I don't want to horn in on Angela's show here. I just wanted to answer some of your questions for you. What's burning through your brain right now?
Hey, the first one I've been wanting to ask you for a while is I'm one of my jobs is I'm a journalist down on the border, Tijuana and San Diego.
Yes, sir.
And Carrie Cassidy had listed me as an unnamed source, and she's gonna interview me at some point. But I've been
fantastic. Carrie's fantastic. She's great. I love Carrie.
Oh yeah, I've been tracking the Chinese troops on the border.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes and thousands and thousands of Chinese immigrants, all males, 20 to 30 come in. You know, in the late 90s, when you were on Art Bell, twice you had remote viewed or predicted a point in time where the Chinese would invade and Hillary Clinton would nuke Florida. Remember that?
Wow, that was a long time ago. We shifted the timeline quite a bit. It had to do with not so sure about Hillary Clinton nuking Florida, but it's if I said it, I guess I said it. It was from I think what I did say was that between 2018 and approximately 2025 that we were going to see that the United States would begin to break up, and this is all the way back from 94. So let's take it all the way back from 94 just briefly. In 1994, I said that there would be that the Islamic Jihad would carry out a series of terrorist attacks against the United States using the aeronautic infrastructure, and that there would be attacks specifically in Washington, D.C. and New York City, and that I saw the attacks in Washington, D.C. being more biologic, and the attacks in New York being airplanes or something would have to do with airplanes or shooting down airplanes or blowing up airplanes. And that this would then lead to the United States going crazy and lead to a series of wars in the Middle East, which would then begin to bankrupt the United States in the 2006 to 2008 time frame. I think at that time I also said that I saw either a black man or Hillary Clinton, that we would have a woman or a black man as president of the United States in this period of time. And that specifically what would occur was the United States would go bankrupt. There would be a revolution that would begin. The United States would break up into, I believe, first a 6-nation confederation and then a 13-nation confederation that would also include Canada and Mexico. But that Mexico would be devastated by a massive series of earthquakes that would happen primarily a little bit south of Mexico City, and basically the whole area that was the Panama Canal. And that area was inundated somehow through a series of quakes and whatever. But what eventually would occur was that China would begin to expand its influence into Asia, that a confederation between Japan, that the Koreas would eventually merge together, that there would not be a big war with the Koreas, they would just merge. And Japan would come in under Chinese influence, that the Chinese would take over, basically just buy huge chunks of Canada, big tracts of land in Australia, and that it would be financial tensions by 2017, 2018 that would eventually end in a full-scale invasion of the United States by the Chinese somewhere a little bit later on towards about the 2022 to 2023 timeframe, and that we would beat them back. We would actually win this conflict, and that the capital of the North American Union, which would be called at that time, would be Denver, Colorado, and that eventually that after, and there's the one thing in what I saw as a remote view, the one thing that did not happen, or has not happened yet, let's say, was that there was going to be a red mercury device of some kind that was going to be exploded in the Washington, D.C. area. And that in this prophetic vision, that it wouldn't destroy Washington, D.C., but that people would just start moving out of Washington, D.C., because of radiation levels, or it got more uncomfortable. And then I saw, one way or another, the federal capital of the United States was going to move to Denver, having no real idea what red mercury was at that time, and not really knowing anything about Denver, and Denver being the secondary federal capital. And now we're seeing, it's kind of like the butterfly effect, where a butterfly goes between 2 points 1,000 times and never gets there the same way. That now we're seeing the NSA, the CIA, the EPA, the Internal Revenue Service, they're all moving now west, because the federal government owns about, I think they own upwards of about 80% of the land west of the Mississippi. And what's happening is that Arizona, they own almost 65% of Arizona, and Arizona is now passing a law. And here's the weird part about it. They don't really own the land. What they've done is that they've basically put it under the Bureau of Land Management, saying, we will manage all this land for you cheaply, and we will pay for federal agents and guys in trucks and things like this to basically roll around on all this land. Well, it's sort of like giving a bunch of janitors the keys to your building, and then having the janitors turn around one day and say, well, now you got to pay us rent because we own your buildings, because we mop the floors and take care of the place. So the federal government has just said, well, it's ours now because we take care of it and we spend money keeping it up. It's eminent domain. So now we own 60% of the sovereign state, which is crap. So Arizona is now passing a law to take back the federal territory because they can't mine, they can't log. It's hurting their economy. The state of Utah, somewhere to the tune of about 85% of Utah is owned by the federal government. Full on 89% is owned by the federal government in Nevada. And then you can go on to Wyoming and whatever. I mean, it's just crazy, these massive tracts of land that they just take over as national parks. And of course, what that means, it means you can't drill for oil, you can't log, you can't do, anything responsible on it. There's no expansion, there's no growth, there's no economic growth. And let's face it, I'm as much for ecology as the next guy. But these ecologists are so crazy that no building on Earth is acceptable to them. You can't build anything anywhere that they think is okay. So as far as the Chinese invasion goes, after the period of 2025 or so, it's interesting that they actually leave Utah mostly alone. They seem to go around there. And there's this big battle that happens on that's called the Plateau of Judgment. And it's really weird because after I had this, there's all these people that started sending me stuff about Denver and what Denver means in Hebrew. The word Den or Dan is actually for the Danites, and it actually means to judge. Ver or Va means plateau, so actually Denver means plateau of judgment. There's all these biblical prophecies about a second holy land that is prepared in the wilderness, that has a great river to the south and shining seas to the east and west, and its northern border is the top of the world. And this is a quote, I believe, in the book of Joel. And this very much looks to the United States as being the second holy land prepared in the wilderness. And there were huge tracts in the United States that were called the wilderness. I mean, up until the 1930s and 40s even, and whole areas of Washington and Oregon that to this day, have not been explored mostly by people. And so it's very interesting to me that, to see all this come down. Now, have the timelines shifted rather radically from that point? Possibly. But here's the other thing about 2012 is it seems like no matter how the timelines are shifting or jumping or whatever, we seem to just fit back into this groove. We seem to just jump right back into a very specific timeline. Now, the rest of this vision, which was basically like a post-life progression of, okay, instead of going into past lives and seeing what you're doing in past lives, let's go into a future life and take a look at the past and take a look at history. And the rest of it is eventually there's like a meteor, and this was 94 again. There's a meteor that then, so you go through all the wars of God and man. You go through all the wars with Islam, then you go through the war with China, Then everybody kind of catches their breath. And then somewhere between 2028 and 2029, there's some big meteor that then hits the planet, which causes all kinds of chaos for about 7 years. Now, lo and behold, after 94, in 98, NASA then claims that on October 28th of 2028, I believe it is, that there's a meteor heading towards us. Now they're telling us that all kinds of meteors are heading towards us that'll come within 0.001 of Earth or possibly strike the planet between 2027 and about 2029 or so. But eventually this leads up to some miraculous some miracle, something happens where all the calendars change in the year 2034, and there's some miraculous sign in the sky where the only way I can interpret it is every spacecraft or every mothership or every UFO from the Galactic Brotherhood appears for one day, cleans the atmosphere, puts the planet in a proper tilt or axis, and then they just disappear. I mean, they don't help us, they don't do anything else, they basically just reset everything. More for their own good, because having the planet do all kinds of crazy wobbly things messes up them being able to travel through this neck of the galaxy. And then the big thing is that by 2039, there's a woman, a young girl called the Emanuela, who actually comes in as the twin flame incarnation of Christ, or of Quetzalcoatl, or the white buffalo calf woman, or whatever. It has something to do with a female Messiah, and she launches us into this amazing, spectacular sort of golden age. And one other thing I'll tell you, Michael, too, is that when I was in Canada, I go back and forth to Vancouver because I work on film projects up there, and so I've got a film permit. I've got a work permit in Canada, and I've got my Canadian driver's license. Because I'm up there and I have to be able to work. But when we were getting our work visas to go work in Canada, I mean, there was a line at the immigration office that went like out the building, through all the twisty, snaky, serpentine places where you sit or where you stand, and out the building. And I think my wife and I were the only two white people in that line. I mean, every single person in that line, hundreds of people in that line, were all from China. Every single one of them. Every single one. So they're flooding into because it's easy to actually apply for residency there. I mean, they are flooding into Vancouver. I mean, as a matter of fact, Vancouver, it's funny because Los Angeles has the highest Hispanic per capita population outside of Mexico City. And now Vancouver actually has the highest per capita population for Oriental, for Asian, outside of Beijing. So it's anyway. So if you want to know where the Chinese are really coming in, they're coming in through Canada, and what they're doing in the United States is obviously they're coming in and buying a store. That's the anchor thing here, or actually a lot of them are going through Panama as well, because you can actually get like Panamanian passports, and you can plunk down like $50,000 in a bank account there, which gives you some diplomatic immunity actually out of Panama. But the Chinese are kind of winning the war worldwide, and the biggest thing about them, and this has to do with Africa and what's going on with AFRICOM and why the United States is in Africa, is there's going to be a war in the Congo. The bottom line is that the Chinese are in there, and look, they're building stuff. They're building bridges and soccer stadiums, basically as gifts. They're not putting anything on anything they're doing. The United States goes in. First off, we say we do a bunch of stuff and then we never do. Second off, even if we wind up doing something, it comes with a bunch of junk attached to it, like, well, you've got to behave and you've got to do this, and, it has to be truth, justice, and the American way. The Chinese don't care. The Chinese are like, yeah, we'll build this stuff for you, no problem. Oh, and by the way, we want a little favor. But what the war is going to be over, and this is why AFRICOM is such a big deal. It's also why they're making such a big deal out of this Coney guy. The whole Coney 2012 thing. Are you familiar with that website video? The reason they're making such a big deal about it is, the 75 million hits, and that guy that, wound up, now there's a South Park saying, it's like, dude, you're going to go crazy. You get too famous on the internet, you're going to wind up whacking it in San Diego, which I think is very funny. Dude, you're going to wind up whacking it in San Diego. Obama putting in advisors there to supposedly chase this Coney guy down, to once again interfere in Uganda's politics, is the camel's nose under the tent. just as an excuse for the United States to get troops in there, because eventually the war is going to be over something called coltan. And coltan is a rare earth mineral that you can't build robots or iPods or iPads or computer devices, or you can't build anything without it. And this is what coltan, C-O-L-T-A-N, coltan. And it's interesting because there was a TV show on Fox for a little while that starred, I think it was Nina Headey, who's also on Spartacus, and she's been in a bunch of other things. But it was called the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Did you ever see it? Any of it?
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Sarah Connor Chronicles. One of the interesting parts about this is they actually had an entire episode where the Terminators were coming back from the future, and they all were storing something in a warehouse, and they had to figure out what it was. And in the episode, these guys who were storing, who were basically storing this stuff up for the future, were storing coltan in the warehouses so that they could then build the Skynet robots and all that in the future. So I just think it's interesting that, the media caught on to something like that. And, but that's, so I'm sorry, I just went off on a bunch of different things, but,
that's cool.
As far as Hillary Clinton goes, again, the really interesting alteration of the timeline for me, to see what happened with, her whole arc is, for all intents and purposes, she should have been president of the United States. For all intents and purposes, she had the delegates, she had the votes, and she got called on the carpet by, and this was the big battle between the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. Well, I can't say a battle. The Rockefellers and the Rothschilds on the inner core of the Kunabula, which is actually what it's called on the inside, which is what you people, what everybody else calls it, the Bilderbergers, which is not the real name of the group or the organization. They call it Bilderberger because they just met at the Bilderberg Hotel in 1955 in Baden-Baden, Germany. But the inner core of these guys is called the Incunabula, and it's a very interesting Latin term which means nest of snakes or nest of vipers, or actually the literal Latin translation is a clutch of viper eggs is actually really what it is. It's got some very draconian aspects to it. But it was a term that Christ used when he was dressing down the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were saying, it was a whole conversation he had where they said, oh, we want you to shut this crowd up. And Christ said, if I was to hush every voice, the very stones would speak my name. And what he was talking about the Great Pyramid. The stones of the Great Pyramid would predict who he was and what his mission was. And then he said, you are of your fathers. He said, you are of your fathers. And they said, yes, we are of our fathers Abraham. And he said, no, you are of your fathers Shaitan, the serpent god. And he said, because those who were the true children of Abraham would not harm the prophets and would not wish harm to those who were telling them the truth. And then he says in Latin, he says, thou whited sepulchres, thou clutch of serpents' eggs, which is in Cunabula, which was his enemies. Now, in the inner core, when these guys meet, and they're going to meet again, where are they meeting now? This month, at the end of this month, between the last weekend in May and first week in June, they were supposed to be meeting in March at the Rothschild Hotel in Tel Aviv in Israel. And for some reason that got called off. And now they're going to be meeting somewhere in West Virginia, which is going to be interesting because that's also, I think, the same place where they met in 2008. And the inner core of the group has a panel, if you will, of 15 guys. That it's very James Bond, like Smersh, Blofeld kind of stuff. They don't even have names. They're just numbers from 1 to 15. And 15 is like the chairman of the board. And he's like the CEO of planet Earth. And there's about 60 people around them. And then they're the ones that set the agenda for the other about 600 people that then attend this conference, which are, prime ministers and politicians and, David Rockefeller and Gregory Schwartz, also known as George Soros, people like that. So, in 2008, it was just very weird because they all met in West Virginia, and they basically called Hillary Clinton and Obama's people on the carpet, And they were jumping up and down, and Hillary's people presented the whole thing, saying, "Look, this guy isn't even an American. This Obama guy was born somewhere else." And by the way, this is where, and I heard this all the way back in 2008 from a guy that was on the inside that was connected with Israeli intelligence, and he was the one that told me way back then. He was saying that Israeli intelligence presented to them saying Obama's a bad guy. He's a Muslim. He's the illegitimate son of Malcolm X. And he's a radical socialist Muslim, and we feel that he would be a threat to the safety of Israel. And the Hillary people, and this is what the Hillary people were saying about Clinton. They were presenting this whole thing about Obama. And then they sort of sat back, and then Soros got up and said, look, Obama is an unknown quality. He's very smooth. He's very slick. He can get away with a lot more stuff that Hillary couldn't. We'll be able to neutralize any revolts from the blacks. We'll be able to hypnotize people because he's black and because of the whole racist thing that we've drummed into people over the course of the last 20 years. And he'll be able to get away with the health care laws because that's why he's there. He's a one-trick pony. They put Carter in 76 to just give away the Panama Canal, transfer a bunch of money, and pump up the cocaine trade through the canal. They put Clinton in 92 just to enact NAFTA and tear down the borders of the United States and basically open up the borders between Canada and Mexico. Clinton outsmarted him, though. He was only going to be like a one-trick pony, but he was smart enough to be able to play the game, and he was also smart enough to pin the Oklahoma City bombings where he had the choice to pin it on the Iraqis and go to war and start the whole Iraq war early if he wanted to, or pin it on white separatists and Timothy McVeigh and the Rush Limbaugh types and, the political right, because you can basically trace Clinton's re-election back in 1996 right back to the Oklahoma City bombing and his blaming the whole setup of Timothy McVeigh, who's a CIA operative, and he was a hero to the CIA, and they pinned a medal on him, and he's not dead. They faked his death, as I told everybody they were going to do months before it happened, and he's got a couple $1 million in his bank account. He's probably living in Montana somewhere. So the interesting one-trick pony about this is that they said between the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers go in and they basically just tear everything down, kill everybody, don't take care of the sheep, kill the sheep, we'll get more sheep. And the Rockefellers have set up places like Soviet Russia and communist China and Cuba. That's what's been done with Rockefeller funds. And if you don't believe me, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, David Rockefeller was sitting in his dacha outside of St. Petersburg, basically doing all the paperwork and ruling over the bankruptcy of the Soviet Union. And everybody that had anything to do with the Soviet Union had to go see David Rockefeller to get their checks or do whatever. And he basically, as the CEO of the Soviet Union, presided over the breakup and the bankruptcy. But this is where Putin came in, figured out a way to make all kinds of money drilling oil, paid off all the debts of the International Monetary Fund, and kicked the Chase Manhattan Bank out of Russia, grabbed David Rockefeller by the scruff of the neck, and gave him the boot and kicked his ass out of Russia. And Putin's like, in my opinion, Putin's a hero. Putin's the only one to stand up to these guys. And I know a lot of people out there are saying he's, he's bad and he's the strong man and all this, but between him and Medvedev, the Russians are really, between the Russians and the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now, the military Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're like the only good guys left that are really fighting these people. And George Soros got up at the 2008 Bilderberg meeting and said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to introduce European socialism, but in order to introduce these things, you've got to bribe people. We're going to build the same jail, and it's going to have the same guard towers, and it's going to be the same kind of prison, but we're going to give people a blanket and a pillow. We're going to give them European style socialism like they have in France and whatever else. Give them a blanket, give them a pillow, give them all jobs. We're going to introduce this whole healthcare thing. And that's going to be the camel's nose under the tent. That's going to be, you're not going to be able to go to a hospital. You're not going to be able to go to a doctor. You're going to have to pay these premiums. The Internal Revenue Service is going to be responsible for actually making sure you pay them. You're going to be and again, if the government can force you to go into the private sector and buy a product, then as Judge Anton Scalia said perfectly rightly, he said, well, can the government force us to eat broccoli next? Because if they're going to violate not only the 10th Amendment of the independent rights of the states, but the 4th Amendment, the 5th Amendment, everything else, this is so key. That's why it's going to be so interesting. And Elena Kagan, she should recuse herself because she was the pro-counsel that was pushing this crap when she was Obama's pro-counsel. And the fact that she's ruling on this is a complete outrage. And there may be the possibility that she may have to recuse herself, which could lead to the Supreme Court being tied 4-4. As opposed to a 6-4 decision, and it would certainly be better for the country if it maybe went 7-3, and at least one of the liberal justices finally said, "Okay, enough's enough." I mean, we can tear up the Constitution only so far, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to rant on all this stuff. I'm just my apologies.
No.
I'm just going off on all this crap, and so it's anyway. I just want to say and whatever.
Well,
So I didn't mean to take over your show. I didn't mean to do all this stuff and just rattle on. So I thank Angela, and I very much appreciate it. And so I'm sorry.
Are you doing your AFR show too?
I'm going to try. Actually, I'm sort of I was on my way to seeing my sister up in Reno and my family, and Angela was kind enough to let me sort of crash at her house here. So I might actually do this evening's show.
We're coming up on a break here.
Okay.
This is Michael Hemmingson filling in for Peter Petrov, and Angela's co-host. We'll be back with Sean David Morton. Atlas actually let go of the earth to shake his hand.
You guys are funny.
No, they're totally they're way in. Okay, everyone, it's Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio. We'll be right back after this short break, so stay tuned.
Huge inventory of political bumper stickers and messages
Hi,
that
Anthony Sullivan here for the Turbo
If
Snake.
you're the mother of the
fastest,
child
easiest way to
Voices publishing peace and violence.
information, wonder if we're
Finding the right attorney is a daunting task.
Hey, wait a minute. That ain't right. We don't do commercials here. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. 100% listener supported, commercial free radio. So far.
Tell me something good.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned in to Revolution Radio. Listen to At This Moment with the Nevada nemesis, Miss Angela Black, and the Bulgarian bomber, Mr. Peter Petrov. So call on in, tell him something good. 347-688-2902. freedomslips.com.
Oh, God. All right, guys. Call in and tell me something good.
Yeah! Tell me something good.
Bam. And we're back. Okay, Michael Hemmingson, I just wanted to let you know that apparently we have the honor of Sean David Morton ready to answer some of your questions because he felt that he did not do so in the first half hour of the second hour of this show At This Moment with Angela Black and the ever-absent Peter Petrov, who will be back, I am hoping, next week. You know, it is an electricity thing. He spoke with the mayor. I don't know, if I had a mad Peter Petrov at me and I was the mayor, I'd be a little scared because, homie walks around with a bat. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so, all right, here we go. I'm going to put him back on. And you guys, I hope you don't mind not listening to Angela babble for a change. What an honor, everyone. It's Sean David Morton here, and apparently he might be doing his show from this particular home, and I will give you guys that website, but it is AmericanFreedomRadio.com and or StrangeUniverseRadio.com, and that's going to be at 7 p.m. our time or 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So we'll see you guys soon, and I'm going to put you back on with the man himself who's staying, I'm so honored to have him as my house guest. Ready?
The man who once ran a marathon backwards to see what second place looked like?
He said the man who once ran a marathon backwards to see what a second place looked like. All right, here you go, Michael.
All right.
Hey, Michael, how are you? Thanks.
As you can tell, I listen to your show.
Yeah, I just goof around. So, lay it on me. I wasn't sure I answered your question, though. I'm sorry. I got off on some other things.
Okay, the other thing, I've been trying to get a passport for New Lemuria, but no one ever returns my email.
All right, well, the problem is that it's, all right, well, if you go on newlemuria.org, I can give you new Lemuria, LEMURIA.org. newlemuria.org, you can actually see the country and the nation state. It's not going to go out there. The country and the nation state. This is something we've been working on for a long time. And Richard McDonald, who's the president of the country, he's the president. We try to do everything. And what it is that there are, it went through a lot of transitions because originally, well, it's just kind of a long story. The long story is this was originally started as the Dominion of Melchizedek.
Right.
And there are 5 islands, and I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are 5 islands in the South Pacific that are on a 99-year lease, and it started out by the Pedleys, this father and son. I think it's Mark and Alan Pedley. I may have their names incorrect, but so they started this, and I think what they did is they just sort of started running around instead of doing it the right way and doing the things that they're supposed to do. They started doing banking, and they started doing. They just started doing a lot of things without the permission of the government and, of the host country, if you will. And I think what they got one of the Pedleys on was he had a post office box in Washington, D.C., and they tried to claim that was mail fraud somehow because he just had things out of a post office box. And so he was kind of kicked out of the country in the late 90s. And then Richard McDonald took it over. And according to him, the State Department said, look, we don't like the bad press that was associated with Melchizedek and, what the Pedleys were doing, and we wanted to completely disassociate ourselves with them. So we changed the name of the country to New Lemuria with the new seals and the new stuff, and we actually transferred all the contracts and all the things over. The real challenge is that New Lemuria does not have sovereign territory. What it has is that it has these 5 islands in the South Pacific, but they're on like 99-year sovereign leases. But what they've been working on for quite some time is actually getting like a sovereign spit of land that's actually owned by the nation state so that they could actually say that, they have an actual sovereign country. So as far as I know, there are about 3,500 citizens of New Lemuria kind of worldwide that are provided with travel documents and international driving permits and passports and all that, which are perfectly fine. The ambassadorships, I was at one time the what they call an ambassador at large, which allows me to like declare war, on people. Like we've got an army, which I think is a guy named Bob that lives on the island who will poke you right in the eye with a stick. This guy, and so I'm not so sure what's going on with it because I keep calling and saying, well, what's happening, and they keep dealing with the State Department, and they have letters going back and forth, and all the stuff, and it's just. I don't know what to tell you. It's not very well organized because Richard McDonald is he's handling a few too many things by himself. And, what I'll do is if you're still interested, I don't think they're handing out ambassadorships anymore. If anything, they're ambassadors of goodwill. But you can probably still get in as usually you have to be hosted. You have to have somebody actually recommend you to the nation state. And then that way, at least I can call, President McDonald and, get you referred in. And, get into it that way. So, and, it's worked out for me. I mean, I do have consular core plates on my car out of the state of Nevada and all that. What? Well, because they're stupid at the DMV. I mean, they issued me my plates, and then unfortunately I went to a DMV in podunk nowhere, and these women, after wasting like hours of my time, they basically came out and they said, well, we don't understand this, and we don't issue these plates here. And, I didn't blow up at him. I should have just said, look, my suffering and sitting here for hours and hours because you're too stupid to know how to do your job. You should give me the benefit of the doubt. You issued me the plates, and now you're not going to issue me a tag because you don't understand anything, because you're like, oh, we don't know what this is. And it's just, and in Las Vegas, they know what they're doing. They're just like, sure. Okay, here we go. We got the plates in the drawer, So it's all good. So what I'll do, long story short, give me a call. We'll be in touch. I will call President McDonald. I will find out what the status is as to whether or not they are still issuing citizenships or ambassadorships, or they've been requested by the State Department to put things on hold while they're going through their processes of getting recognition. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So with a passport from New Lemuria, like in Tijuana, I could use it for an ID, but I can't cross the border with it, right?
You can go into any country, I think, that actually accepts them. I've traveled all over the world with it. I've gone into Mexico, Ecuador, Peru, with my Lemurian passport. But you have to have a U.S. passport to actually then re-enter the United States. You can't re-enter the United States with the passport because it's still in what they call it's not on their file list yet because it does not have the 3-digit country code. And any country has to be issued a 3-digit code either by the United States government, the United Nations, or, strangely enough, and this is who decides whether or not you're a country, as weird as it sounds, It's the UPU, which is the United Postal Union out of Switzerland. And look it up sometime on the internet. UPU, the United Postal Union, has all these people kind of dancing around, holding hands around a planet, and they're the ones who decide whether or not you get mail delivery or can have stamps, and they actually issue a 3-digit code that says you're an official country that goes in the book, which is another interesting thing that has to do with the bankruptcy of the United States and who the actual trustee of the bankruptcy is, because there's a whole trail that actually goes through the UPU, that the Universal Postal Union, because it's out of Switzerland, is all run by, it's Switzerland, and the UPU is all what's left of the Templars. You know, when the Knights Templar used to run their financial empire before they were destroyed by the kings of Spain and the kings of France in 1307, which is the whole Black Friday thing about October 13th of 1307. And the Templars were destroyed, and they were all burned at the stake and all this other stuff. You know, for 300 years, they had one of the most powerful financial empires on earth. And you could give a Templar a bag of gold in Sicily, as an example, and that bag of gold would wind up absolutely 100% in London or Paris or wherever else. So it's interesting to see how everything still goes through Switzerland and Geneva. There's a lot of people that think, and then, you know, Carrie Cassidy I talked to her about this, that a lot of the stuff about the Holy Grail and the Grail quest and all that was that the Holy Grail was actually found in Geneva, in Switzerland, not in England, but in Geneva. And but it's a whole different thing about the bankruptcy of the United States and how the actual guardian, or shall we say the trustee of the bankruptcy, is actually the Universal Postal Union. But that's a whole other talk. And what else you were asking? You're asking somebody about Chinese on the border in Tijuana?
Well, that's what I've been tracking, and ever since Carrie had mentioned that on her blog like 3 weeks ago, a lot of people have been picking up on it. Like Drake, you know, they asked Drake about it, and Drake, and this is something I'm not buying. Drake had said that his white hat contacts in the Pentagon had contacted the Chinese military and made a deal with them not to invade when all the arrests start happening, and that the Chinese military would actually go and take out the drug cartels. I don't buy that.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that for a second either. And it's also, but where the Chinese, you know, where we know the Chinese are, is that they own Whampoa. They control both sides of the Panama Canal because, you know, as you know, well, I don't know if people know this or not, because the Panama Canal is really archaic. I mean, it's 112 some years old, and it doesn't hold super tankers. So what happens is that what China did is they horned into all the business on either side of the canal. So if you're actually coming with a super tanker, that boat, that ship, has to be unloaded onto other ships that can actually go through the Panama Canal, then be reloaded onto larger craft on the other side. Well, the Chinese control that entire trade. Whampoa down there controls both sides of the canal. And they're doing a massive retrofit on the canal and widening the canal, and that's all Chinese money. And the Chinese have been talking for years about just outright buying the Panama Canal, with the agent for the sale of the Panama Canal, I might add, being Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger is the one that engineered the giveaway of the canal in the first place to the Panamanians under the Carter administration. So it's they're all through Nicaragua, they're all through Panama, they're all through Central America, and the Chinese mob runs Costa Rica.
They also own the Long Beach Harbor now.
And not really, but they own Costco.
Really?
Costco is the big one, and Costco they do not own it outright, but they provide fully on probably about 80% of the shipping that runs through, and it's actually the Port of Los Angeles. You have to speak properly. It is the Port of Los Angeles. It's not Long Beach Harbor. There is a strip of land that goes from downtown LA. This is absolutely true. That goes from downtown LA. There is a tentacle of land that runs along the 110 freeway where the city of Los Angeles owns the Vincent Thomas Bridge, and then it goes all the way out into what is Long Beach everywhere around it, but is actually owned by the city of Los Angeles as the Los Angeles Harbor.
Okay.
So they own it. So you have to be very specific with that. And yeah, Costco actually runs most of it, but no, they've bought a lot of it. They rent a lot of it, but the United States has not allowed the sale of the actual port itself to the Chinese because they can't be owned by foreign nationals or whatever. But they have no problems with them doing all the shipping and them doing everything else. And of course, what they're finding is that Costco is now shipping. They've just caught shipments of Chinese parakeet missiles and AK-47s, and the Chinese do seem to be arming the major gangs, or a lot of the weapons that are being smuggled to the gangs in South Central, and the Crips and the Bloods and the Hoover family, and what's the Mexican gang? It's something M33, I think it is, or
right.
M33 and those gangs. And I'm familiar with a lot of this stuff because I worked with Pete Carroll's charity, Better LA, and my PhD is in psychology with a specialty in therapeutic counseling. And so I've done a lot of counseling of these kids in the whole area just north of USC, the whole Hoover block, which is pretty cool because we took the murder rate down from, I think, like 66 a year in this area that we were working in to literally 0 in this 6-block area, because we were just talking to these kids and trying to give them some hope, and trying to do something good for that whole area, because it's my school and my university that's in South Central there. And so anyway. But definitely the Chinese are in there. Let me say one other thing about the Chinese.
Okay.
The Chinese are not as big they're not as big a threat as most people realize, because first off, there is nobody that lives in the middle of China. Nobody. There's whole cities that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars building that nobody lives in. That's a big mystery. We take satellite photos of the middle part of China, and there's nobody freaking there. Everybody moved into the various provinces. And China right now, and I know this sounds like an outrageous thing, but China is on the verge of economic collapse in a lot of different ways, because they're like Japan was on steroids when Japan was in the 1980s. Every product in China that costs $1 takes the Chinese 98 to 99 cents to make. Their profit margin is immensely thin. And because the United States is hurting, remember, we're buying all their junk. We're buying all their crap, and even Walmarts are going out of business here because, on this race to the bottom. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if there's a mass devaluation of the currency, because the Chinese hold all this debt. And if they're talking about, because the only thing that Ben Bernanke hasn't done that he promised to do, and he made 5 promises in a speech in 2002, where they asked him, if you were director of the Federal Reserve and you were faced with a depression, what would you do? And Ben Bernanke said, I would buy up the debt of the United States, which he started doing. I would use the power of the printing press to basically infuse money into everything, which he did. I would rebalance the balance sheets of the United States, which they did by buying GM and Chrysler. What was one other thing he said he was going to do? Basically hyperinflate, throw money out of helicopters, I think he said in that same speech. But the one thing, I can't remember all 5 of them, but the one thing that he said he would do that he has not done yet is that he would devalue the currency. And if you look at the devaluation of the currency and the confiscation of gold and silver back in between 1933 and 1935, FDR tricked everybody. FDR got everybody to turn in their gold, turn in their silver, be good Americans. We'll give you a good deal. Your gold is worth $20 an ounce. We'll give you paper money that's worth $35. So you'll make $15 in paper money. Then he cut everybody's throat and said, ha, now you can't own gold and silver, and now I'm going to set the price of gold and silver at $35. Well, I'm sorry, gold specifically at $35 an ounce, and then he outlawed private possession of all gold and silver as well. So what it wound up doing is it wound up devaluing the currency of the United States by about 46%, if you actually look at all of it that way. So if you're looking at a devaluation of the currency, and I think it would, if I was them, okay, and I'm thinking what I call scum power logic. If I'm these guys and I need to trick the population and I've got the control of the media and whatever else, I wouldn't want Obama in there for another 4 years. The guy's just got too many skeletons in his closet. There's going to be armed revolt if he continues the way he's going. The dude I would get would be Mitt Romney, who looks like frickin' Ward Cleaver from the Leave It to Beaver show, who looks like a president, who's got this, and everybody's going to say, oh, well, he knows what he's doing financially, forgetting completely that he was the guy that ran Bain Capital, that was all about basically taking companies and stripping them and selling them for basically their spare parts. But when he comes up, looking very Reagan-esque and says, well, gee, gosh, we've got to revalue the currency because it's good for America. People are going to go, okay, I get it. He's helping us. He knows what he's doing. He's reorganizing the economy. And, this is the whole thing that the George Soros planned out in May of 2011 at his Bretton Woods II conference, and why Soros is the one who's been chortling on CNN, saying that by this summer, there is going to be armed revolt in the streets. This is George Soros saying this on CNN, saying there's going to be blood in the streets. There will be revolution. There will be riots. There will be chaos. This is Soros. Meanwhile, if you connect those statements with the Bilderberg meeting later this month, with Operation Unified Vision 2012, which was something that was started by the military and the Joint Chiefs at the E-Ring of the Pentagon in late 2008, after somebody stole $3.5 trillion. They swordfished the computers. They used Promise 2 software. And on September 11th of 2008, between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., just to show you who was behind it, Angela Black's birthday, I might add, that in honor of Angela Black's birthday, they spiked the world computers and they stole $3.5 trillion with a T, out of the world economy until all the computers realized what was happening and they went into catastrophe mode and shut themselves down. Had that not happened, they would have taken it all. They would have taken almost $7 billion out of the world economy, and we could have said bye-bye to the Western civilization as we know it. After that, the military formed Operation Unified Vision 2012. They met in Chantilly, West Virginia last November again. And here it is. Their conundrum is, what is going to be the response of the U.S. military if there is a complete social, political, and economic breakdown of the United States in the summer of 2012. And that's what that's the equation that has been before them since 2008. And we're pretty much right on key for that, because if you study the Time Wave Zero software and you understand the astrological significance of the chart of the United States, of what we are going through now, and you get that this is the crucifixion of America, that from 2008 all the way through 2016, right now, where you've got Saturn, who's the old man in Libra, who's crying for justice, who's crying for balance, who's crying for a reorganization to make things fair. You've got his father, Uranus, on the other hand, now in Aries. And just imagine a completely crazy old man with his hair on fire, basically just lashing out at everybody with a razor. And, you know, because Uranus rules atomic war, nuclear conflicts, nuclear accidents, and now it's in Aries, which is the planet of war. And that's why we're talking about atomic reactors in Iran, atomic strikes on Iran. And let's not forget that now the Congress has started to actually take notice of Fukushima in Japan, because Tower 4 of Fukushima has 1,600 nuclear fuel rods in it. And if you gave this tower a good swift kick, it would drop into the ocean and it could conceivably cause an extinction level event. And already across the west coast of the United States, all the way down from Oregon and Washington into California, all the way down to Hermosa Beach, Caltrans and the Highway Patrol, strangely enough, this is a weird stat, are now claiming that the background radiation is 300 times higher than it was before Fukushima. So all these nuclear things happening. And then meanwhile, you've got Pluto, who is the great underwriter. Anything Pluto goes through, he undermines, he destroys, and he's in Capricorn. And what does Capricorn rules? It rules the skeleton. It rules the constitution, the basis of things. It rules sewers, but it also rules oil, gold, silver, things that are underground, but it also rules banking institutions. And all these things. Now, it's interesting that Uranus is going to be in the exact same spot in the sky where it was then, on between approximately June 24th and about July 19th of this year, is going to be in the same spot in the sky where it was during the October 1929 stock crash. At the same time, Pluto is in the same spot in the sky where it was between 1766 and approximately 1780, which means the American Revolution. And Saturn is interesting because Saturn is in Libra in the chart of the United States, which means every 30 years, the United States goes through a massive nervous breakdown. Every 30 years in people's lives, when Saturn returns to the place, it's called a Saturn solar return, that when Saturn actually returns to the place in your chart at 29.5 to 30 or so, you're either rewarded for good things that you've done and you get accolades and prizes and diplomas and certificates and whatever for your study, or Saturn beats the crap out of you with a stick for being lazy and not paying attention in class. And every 30 years when Saturn goes into Libra, the United States has a complete total psychotic freak out, nervous breakdown. And we think the world's going to end and the economy is going to be destroyed. And let's just give an example. 30 years ago, when Saturn was in Libra, we went from Jimmy Carter, big-time socialist, giving away the Panama Canal, probably the worst president we've ever had until Barack Obama came in. And what do? We then elected Ronald Reagan. 30 years before that, we went from Harry Truman into Dwight Eisenhower. 30 years before that, we went from Woodrow Wilson into Warren G. Harding, and then I think Calvin Coolidge, and all that. So again, you see a concern for the Constitution, concern for money, concern for the economy, and a really heavy duty move to the right. I also think that the Republican convention is still going to be brokered. I think that there's going to be a gigantic Megillah, a huge Magoo, as we used to call it, in Ireland, and this gigantic fight, because I don't think Romney's going to win in the first round, and I also still think that Ron Paul is going to have a very impressive showing, and I think Ron Paul is going to have a lot more influence than a lot of people think, because Ron Paul has not given up yet. They still haven't gone through California. It's going to be interesting to see how it comes down.
Well, it looks like the show's ending.
Okay, Angela here. Okay, thanks, Michael. It was a pleasure talking.
Thanks, John.
Here.
Okay, cool. Hey, okay, great. How was it? Did you love?
I would like to see the two of you talking together.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. Actually, it's in talks. So we're gonna figure that out. I don't know which one of us will get a word in edgewise. It'll probably be him because I don't know much. I'll just read news. But anyway, yes, may happen in the future. Not necessarily today. Really great to have you on the show, Michael Hemmingson. I'm sure that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lemuria.
Yeah,
citizenship, sovereignty.
Radio.
Huge inventory of political bumper stickers and messages.
Hi, Anthony Sullivan here for the
Again,
Turbo
if you're
Snake.
the mother of the child,
Thanks,
The easiest way to uncover any
peace of mind.
information to wonder that's
Finding the right attorneys a daunting task.
Hey, wait a minute. That ain't right. We don't do commercials here. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. 100% listener supported, commercial free radio. So far.
Hi, everyone. This is Rebecca Jernigan, host of Journeys with Rebecca radio show. Join me Monday through Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Join in on the guests who bring astrology, channeling, higher consciousness, alternative health, extraterrestrials, metaphysics, paranormal, hidden history, ancient civilizations, and so much more. I will also devote shows to readings and open mics where you let me know what you want to talk about. It all happens here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, Monday through Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Join in on the journey.
Worldwide Internet Radio. Join us here weekdays for our new daytime schedule here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. At 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Deacon John brings you the Libertarian Hour, directly followed by Francis Walsh at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Impact Zone. Immediately following that, it's At This Moment with Angela Black and Peter Petrov. Join us weekdays here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Wait, do you guys hear that? Wait, yeah, it's the truth. Yeah, you're listening to The Truth here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
good, kids. Now come and get your Ritalin.
Tom Gilroy, We the People. Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. Revolution Radio. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.